if you like.
Okay, well, I kind of want to start off with, I suppose, this theme in your kind of writing work, and what appeals to you, because you've done the Tablet Lock, you did The Kid Who Would Be King with Lockwood Co. Again, it's like young people shouldering the burdens of the world.
Yeah.
Why is that so appealing?
Well, I think it is because it's exciting and fun, and I think a lot of good stories for young people are about that. They plunge young people into the adult world. You know, kids in stories are often orphans, aren't they? And parents are dead or lost in some accident, and they suddenly have to take on this massive burden. It's an exciting thing, and you know, all the movies I grew up with. I grew up in the 80s, which was a fantastic time for cinema for young people. You know, I watched The Kid My Age in E.T. and kids my age in Lindsay Anderson's If. You know, movies like The Black Stallion, and so I don't know. I loved when I was young seeing myself on screen in high stakes situations, and yeah, I've ended up doing 3 stories like that. But maybe I'll do a film with set in an old people's home next.
Yes, we need that representation. Cocoon, the remake. Lockwood Co. It's been in development for like about 10 years. So I'd love to know, at what point did you get involved and how that worked out?
Yeah, the books were, there was a kind of bidding war for the first book when it came out, and a big studio optioned it. We tried to get it back then, but a big studio optioned it, and then they tried to make it into a feature, and it languished in development for a while, and we were off doing other things. And then the option lapsed, it didn't get picked up, and in that period the other 4 books had come out. So we jumped on them and thought, well, actually this would make a really good TV show, because there was so much story and so much development. And so while I was making The Kid Who Would Be King, I got on the phone to Jonathan Stroud, the author, and had a really long talk about how much I loved it and what we wanted to do with it. And yeah, it went from there. We were lucky to get it.
I always think it's interesting when you're adapting work with the author and having that conversation. Are they very much like, I've written the books, you do what the hell you want, or was it kind of they had certain parameters like, okay, but I want you to kind of make sure you get this right or that? Was it a lot of freedom?
No, he's a good guy, and he understands that the show will be a slightly different thing from the book, because the books are always there and the books are phenomenal. But this show's pretty faithful to the books, and he was very involved. He got to read every script, he came to the set, he got to meet the actors. We went to him whenever we needed detail. One of the things that really gets me in film and television is when someone opens a newspaper or a book. Do you ever freeze frame? I always freeze frame, especially in 4K, because you can look at that text and you can kind of judge how carefully the producers have created this thing by looking at the text. If it's a slightly crap film, they'll just be gibberish. Sometimes it's Latin, isn't it? But Jonathan has written every little bit of text that appears in Marissa Fitz's manual, in the newspapers. So all the detail is right, all the labels on the equipment from satchels. So he was brilliant. He was there for us for all that detail, for backstories. Stuff that isn't in the book that we invented, like the book is quite light on Lucy's backstory, and we invented a bunch of that you know, we ran past him and got his blessing on. Yeah, so he understands it's different, but this is very much kind of a collaboration with him.
I'm just very excited to go back and like watch shows and now stop it and pause it now. You've given me like a new
Yeah, God, I hope I'm right.
Everyone's gonna be checking. As you mentioned, there's 5 books in the series, and I suppose again, making it your own. How much do those storylines feature in season 1? Or I mean, of course, we're not sure if it's gonna get more coming out, hopefully. But like, how much of those different storylines from the different books feature in the first season?
The first season is pretty much books 1 and 2. Yeah, with some changes, but we're pretty faithful to the books. So that is a short and precise answer.
Very, like, not giving anything away. As you said, you know, you love the 80s, and you've always had such a love, and it shines through in your work, like with references from things that you've loved, TV shows and films. What were the kind of like big hitters for you that might influence in how you wanted to conceive this and realize it on screen?
Well, we looked at a lot of ghost movies about ghosts. We take some stuff from Poltergeist. There's the 80s Poltergeist. The way that
specifically that
well,
one.
it is very specific. The way that they come out of walls. Do you remember in Poltergeist when those objects materialize from the ceiling? There's just the analog effects in that movie are very brilliant. The sort of flashes you get when things appear. So there's a couple of effects in my other episode 8, where I literally just sent them that clip. Said do that. What else? You know, we looked at some movies to try and figure out what not to do.
Tell us those movies.
I'm not going to tell you those movies, but you know, ghosts that feel very, very digital, because there's a sort of fairly rote technique for doing ghosts in a lot of modern movies. So we went more back to Victorian spirit photography. We looked at this brilliant book called, I think it's called A Perfect Medium. It was a big photography exhibition about 10, 15 years ago, full of Victorian spirit photography. So we used that as a reference. But yeah, my movies growing up were The Innocents, the Jack Clayton movie, Poltergeist, the original Ghostbusters. Yeah.
You mentioned there with the VFX, and obviously we're like an age now where you can pretty much do everything. So is that kind of a clear thing for you throughout, that you wanted, you mentioned like 80s where actually you didn't have as much but it still managed to grab you? Was that kind of a really good dialogue you were having with your VFX team to ensure that it wasn't going too outlandish in a way that just didn't feel kind of like corporeal?
Well, the story has this brilliant idea, which is that ghosts can kill you if they touch you, which I don't think has ever been part of a ghost story before. Changes the whole chemistry of the thing. So our ghosts had to get involved in action sequences, like that sequence with Lockwood at the top of the stairs, where it's charging him, he's dodging it, it's sort of landing on walls, sort of pushing off. So you've got to approach it in a way that lets you do all that stuff. So we had on set sort of a human dolly with lights on. Then we had a very brilliant acrobatic performer on wires. Then we had a third performer to do the face and the facial performance. So it's a combination of 3 different passes to get that level of agility. And there are lots of different types of ghosts in the series as the series goes on, but they all have to be involved in this combat. So they don't just you don't have the luxury of doing a jump scare and then never seeing it again, or having something vague in the shadows that you can't quite make out. We have to foreground these ghosts and they have to get into it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was a challenge.
And casting this, I think in the book Lockwood is described as quite dashing, Lucy's like a fighter, and you mentioned that obviously you built up Lucy's character. So tell me about casting Cameron and Ruby in these roles.
We saw hundreds and hundreds of young actors, and we were just looking, you're looking for the character to walk into the room. And we found Lucy very early, Ruby Stokes, who'd been in Rocks and Bridgerton. I'd just seen her in Rocks, actually. Rocks was the last film I saw before the first lockdown. And she was just brilliant from the off. She had that same sense of independence and gumption and emotional sensitivity and ambition that Lucy Carlyle has. Cameron was much harder. We saw thousands of young actors. With parts like this, your pool is every young actor of that age who happens to be alive at this moment in time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't go to the past or the future. Your pool is who is there and up for it at that given time. And we were really worried. We didn't think we'd found the person. There were some really brilliant actors, but he's got to be dashing and handsome, but he's also got to be vulnerable and haunted and have that kind of gift of the gab, but also a nervousness and a sensitivity. And Cameron came in very late in the day. In fact, I think we had to go and get him from drama school. I think maybe we went to him rather than vice versa. And yeah, he was just fantastic and had, thank God, everything we needed. And then Ali, again, George is really difficult, a really particular character. He's very clever, but slightly socially dysfunctional, incredibly loyal to Lockwood, and gets very jealous with Lucy as the series proceeds. And again, Ali just walked in and had exactly the right chemistry for the character. You know, he happens to be British Iranian, who the character in the book isn't, but we thought, well, that's a really great chance to like enhance the character with all these different elements that come in later in the series. Yeah, so we just got really lucky, I think, to find three really, really lovely, brilliant, hard-working young actors.
I mean, I love it because my brother's called Kareem, so his surname's
Really?
Kareem in this. So I was like, yes, and I think that's interesting. When
Yeah, that was the surname we worked out with Jonathan
Means
and
generous.
Ali worked it out together, because he's called George Cubbins in the books, but Ali, the actor, and Jonathan Stroud, the author of the books, got together and gave him a new surname.
I like it, and I think, you know, we talk about diversity and representation, but it seems like, how do you be color conscious in casting? And I suppose is that important as well, because it is a diverse cast. So when you're looking at stuff, and especially as a writer, you know, working with the actors to ensure that it's not just kind of putting a, you know, a foreign
Yeah, well,
element.
look, story and character come first, always. But I think you absolutely have to step back and go, is this reflective of the world that our viewers live in? And yeah, so it's always driven by who is the right actor for the role. But yeah, we've luckily ended up with a really good diverse cast.
And tell me some about the older cast. Got Louise Briley, Morgan Christie. How was that casting all those? Because there's also some great faces, like from like, you know, staple British actors. You're like, oh yeah, that guy.
Well, that was great. Yeah, you know, Ivano I knew from Humans, and Morven I knew from Grantchester, and Lou Brearley I knew as a journalist when I was in the Adam and Joe show. I think in the 90s, when I think she might have even interviewed. I don't know why I'm looking at boys. Because I think she was around like in the 90s when we were first around. So I knew her as a journalist, and then of course she went off to become an actress, and then she was so fantastic in Sherlock, so leapt at the chance to work with her. Nigel Planer turns up later. Ben Crompton turns up as well from Game of Thrones. So we've got and that's really important to have a good adult cast in a show with a younger core. In a show with a younger core. Got my intonation wrong at the end of the sentence. Because the adults represent the stakes. They represent the real world, the gravity of the situation. And in Lockwood Co, it is all about these young people taking on all the stuff that young people really shouldn't in the adult world. Yeah, so they're it's a really good adult cast, but they're kind of adults as well.
Yeah,
young adults.
There you go.
There you go.
I mean, we're only in episode 1, but we do go on a bit of a tour around the UK. Pop into Kensal Green Cemetery, obviously in the north. So, how much of those locations were actually in the book, or locations you picked because you wanted to feature them?
Yeah, but the book is written for Kensal Green Cemetery. It's set in Kensal Green Cemetery, and I remember when I was writing that episode, I went there and realised that he'd written it to the precise location, and I was like, man, I really hope they let us shoot here, and they did. So we just staged all that action exactly where it's written. And then what else do we do? We use the houses of detention in Clerkenwell. The houses, where is the house? Somewhere up in, I don't know, I just got in a car and got taken there. My head was just in pre-production. It was somewhere in Islington, wasn't it? Something like that. And yeah, so we do go all over London. It's nice that it's, we shoot on the banks of the River Thames, which is very difficult because there's a very tight tidal window where you can shoot on the beach. I did not direct that episode, thankfully. Someone else had to do that. Brilliant, Catherine. Yeah, so it's a very British production. It's all over London. Yeah, and hopefully places people will recognise.
You mentioned Adam and Joe.
Yeah.
Homemade, like how does this compare to a big Netflix TV production compared to doing that?
Well,
what are the big differences?
There's fewer stuffed toys involved, less glue guns. No, it's very different. But I don't know, fundamentally it's sort of the same. It's putting a camera in front of things and trying to get what you want from them. But yeah, the actors treat me with more respect than Adam used to. Put it that way.
And when we were just outside and we could hear the opening title plays, you were like bopping to the music you were telling me about. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about like the music in this, theme tunes and all that, how you went about it.
Well, for years in development, we were using the Kanye West Kid Cudi song, Kids See Ghosts. And we thought, all right, that was just a fantastic song. But then we tried to clear it, and Kanye asked for something like $1 million. He asked for $1 million, but and we had to re-up it every year or something.
I mean, you dodged a.
Well, and then other things happened around Kanye that thought, well, maybe that wouldn't be such a good shout. And at the time, I was listening to this Canadian band called Bad Bad Not Good, who are an amazing kind of jazz funk fusion band. Makes them sound awful, doesn't it? They're really amazing. And I was just listening to one of their tracks on the way home, walking back from Stockwell Tube, and I thought, man, this would be an amazing title track. And it's called, I always confuse the title of it with the Justin Timberlake song, Hold Back the Night. But it's called something like Can't Escape the Night, I think, isn't it, Elliot?
Yeah.
And yeah, so we use that as our title track. And it's got this great drum fill that we sort of bleed through towards the end of each episode. Yeah.
Can we talk about some of the latest needle drops? Is that okay? Because there's one we were talking about outside The Cure, which was really great. And I mean, you didn't get Kanye, thank God. But you managed to get a few, so how fun was that? Yeah.
Well, that's always fun. You know, personally, I have a thing about needle drops, that they're often overused, and they're used to give you a boost of familiarity and energy, especially on BBC shows where they have a blanket agreement with the PRS, don't they, or whatever, and so they often, let's just drop 2 minutes of a Beatles, 40 seconds of a Beatles track in, and then just fade it out gradually.
I mean, that was the entire movie of Cruella, right?
Yeah.
Like needle drop. They had a Disney budget.
So we try and use them sparingly, and we've gone for some contemporary music, but really a lot of early to mid 80s gothy, Bauhaus, The Cure, because Lockwood Co feels like, even though it's set in the present day, it's a parallel reality where the digital revolution never happened, where this ghost epidemic made industrial development switch tracks and sort of turn into, it became an industrial age again with salt and metal and iron that repels ghosts. The digital revolution didn't happen. So we thought, leaning into that moment in the mid 80s where youth culture was a little bit dark, that sort of mid-Thatcherite gloom that hung over Britain in the mid 80s, was not dissimilar to what's happening in Lockwood. And a lot of that music expresses that sort of romantic doom that the show tries to capture.
You mentioned that in a kind of this, parallel universe, like this dystopian, and I suppose in the world building of that, just like the aesthetics and look, productions, like you mentioned a few places that you visited, but also the costumes that they wear. And I wondered, again, what were the kind of influences on how you were conceiving on that and creating that? Because it does feel like London other.
Yeah, well, we tried to go for materials that weren't too contemporary and manufacturing methods that weren't too contemporary. And if you look closely, none of the cars are digitally designed. They're all in the background vehicles. None of them are computer designed. They're all just pre that technology. There's no cell phones. There's early computers in some of the library scenes. So the clothes are the same, but we wanted to make it feel thrift store.
Yeah.
So that there were second-hand items. Everything was a hand-me-down. Lockwood might be wearing his father's clothes. Lucy's got her stuff in thrift stores.
I did like one jumper she wears, and I'm going to need to know exactly where it's from.
Yeah. Well, talk to our producer Naira Park. She's in charge of jumpers. I think she might have had one of those made for herself even.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so we wanted again that thing where you would go to second-hand stores in the mid 80s. I mean, weirdly, it's kind of what's happening now as well. Like a unique piece is more fashionable now than the latest mass-produced thing, right?
Yeah, fast
you
fashion.
tell me.
No,
I think so.
No fast fashion.
Yeah.
Just girls on topsies.
Plus it's more, but you know, it's good to, it can be more expressive for the characters, you know.
Well, I'm going to open it up. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand.
Of course, there may not be any questions. You might be entirely satisfied.
No, look, there we go. So, you just need one person with a gateway question, and then everyone else will do it.
Hi Joe, thanks very much. I really enjoyed the first episode.
Thank you.
Talking a bit more about production, I especially love like the interior of the house. Could you talk a little bit more about like making it believable that two like teenage boys could reside in there, and like what we might see from it in the rest of the series?
Yeah, do we do that? Do we make it believable? I think it's
so,
more
yeah,
believable
with the writing on the and everything's just cluttered.
When you go into George's room in one of the later episodes. In fact, I don't think you go into any of their bedrooms in this episode. So a lot of the house you're seeing in episode 1 is his father's house, which is the house of an explorer, an adventurer, a kind of ghost hunter. So all this bric-a-brac from all over the world. So we wanted to make it feel like, what's it called? Is it the Sir John Soames Museum in, what's that amazing museum? Come on, Craig.
John Soames.
Yeah, in, where is that? It's like around King's Cross area, sort of.
It's off Holborn.
Holborn, yeah. So, and he was a crazy Victorian collector who basically had a museum in his house. And that was one of the inspirations, where everywhere you look, every object has a story, which ties into the idea of, you know, one of the central premises of the show, which is that every ghost has an object that you have to secure and destroy to kill the ghost. So that was the responsibility of Marcus Rowland, who designed all my movies and all Edgar Wright's movies. He's a very brilliant production designer. And they built that house. It was split into 3 different sets in Ealing Studios, which was very surreal. You'd open a door and there'd just be a sheer drop, and then you'd have to move to the other set to shoot the room that you were going into. Never shot anything like that before. It was very weird and atmospheric. And yeah, it was a really brilliant set. You would find crew members asleep in the double beds sometimes if you like wandered away from where you were shooting, because it was so cozy. But yeah, I look forward to you seeing the other rooms. Like George's room is sort of like the bedroom of a 14-year-old, because he's so sort of nerdy and enthusiastic. He's sort of like a sort of, you know, teen boffin. Yeah, is that any good?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks very much. I also didn't spot a cameo from Adam Buxton.
No, you're right. That's bad, isn't it? I just put myself in it to. I'm screwing the thing on the thing in the.
All right.
But no, that should make him angry. That's something to talk about next.
Season 2, maybe.
Yeah. No, you're right. I should have given him a part.
I want to ask about the low tech or even the non-tech element, which you kind of explained a little bit already, Joe. The lack of mobile phones, lack of laptops. He's even reading 2000 AD, and then why on earth is a 16-year-old girl into Thomas Dolby? Yes. But you explained it very well there. So do we find more about that schism in development in later reps, how the digital revolution, as you said, didn't happen?
We don't explain stuff. There's no character who stands and explains it. Obviously, the world is set up in the opening titles, but that was a deliberate choice. We wanted the audience to lean in and figure it out as they went along. There was anxiousness early on going, oh, we should have a scene where someone says, these are the rules. But I was very resistant to that, because I really like it. I think it credits the audience with some intelligence when you just watch the procedure and you figure it out. And again, the opening credits tell you that iron, salt, repel ghosts. They tell you the problem's been going on for 50 years. They tell you that there's been a massive stock market crash. And then as the story goes on, you meet industrialists who've made their fortunes out of smelting. You go to libraries, you see old-fashioned methods of research. So you kind of pick it up as you go along. But I find, otherwise they'd just be on their mobiles all the time. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get all the good stuff about contemporary culture and none of the stuff that is less cinematic, I think. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question? Yes.
episode was absolutely phenomenal. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question would be, in later episodes, will we revisit the presence that Lucy first met that killed the first agency that she was with?
Do what the ghost in the mill, the specific entity?
Yeah.
Do you feel you've got beef with that?
I'd love for her to be able to win, essentially.
Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay.
I mean, well, let me tell you one thing. If you feel it isn't addressed, then it is addressed in the overall run of the books.
Brilliant.
Yeah. One of the great things about the books is there's a big, like what I like about it is the premise is very simple. When I switch on House of the Dragon, I feel like I'm back at school. I'm in a geography lesson or a history lesson. I'm like, who did what to whom, when, and where are they going? And
They all have the same names as well. Like,
it's hard work, and some people love that. You know, they feel that's like filling and nutritious. But this hopefully is a very straight. You know, it's two kids, weapons. What are they for? Turning up at a house to fight a ghost, and then you pick it up as you go along. There is an overarching mystery that's developed in the books, and a deeper story, and there are little breadcrumb trails in that episode in the first season that then develop, but hopefully not in a way that make you feel you're missing out moment to moment. You know, it's a very fuzzy answer, but you seem pleased.
You've got it all around it. It's very good. Have we got time for one more question? If anyone?
Yeah, we can do one more.
Yeah, anyone got it?
Completely. I'll answer questions about Prince Harry.
Everyone's hand goes up. That gentleman
I know a lot about him.
Really great first episode.
Thank you.
One thing I do want to ask was about the ghosts, actually, because surprisingly enough, we don't see a lot of ghosts. We see like a few here, but it's very much sort of introductory characters, world establishing. One thing I was really curious about was, I guess, how do you find like a balance in design between sort of just a transparent person and full-on Ghostbusters, and how wacky are things going to get with sort of, you know, you've established like type 1s and type 2s, is there going to be any more beyond that? And,
Yeah, there's a type 3, but type 3s are mythological. The only person ever to talk to a type 3 was the founder of the Fitz agency, and that could be bullshit because she was the only one who ever did it, so do we take her at her word? And to talk to a type 3 means you actually have a conversation with a dead person, which is obviously extraordinary and phenomenal. Somebody else in our story might develop that talent. But yeah, the premise with the ghosts was they're all made of ectoplasm, so they're all made of smoke. So our principle was, okay, everything is made out of this smoke, but the smoke can be any density, any color, it can be fully formed, it can be vague or fully formed, and the ghosts can exist at any point from the moment which they died to the state they currently are in the soil. But they can't, you know, they can't get younger or... So we had a set of rules and we had a design principle, and then we worked within those rules to create a bunch of different ghosts. So every ghost you see is made of some sort of smoke, some sort of ectoplasm, but they all have different permutations of that formula. So you do get different ones and you get to see them. I mean, there's a glimpse of one being sliced in the trailer, and there's a big ghost at the very end. I think you get access to it on the, so you can watch the rest, right? I think. Yeah.
Not quite yet, but soon.
Not quite yet.
Well, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you very much, everybody,
Thank
for
you,
coming so early.
Yeah, and reminder that everything from here is under embargo until January 24th. The series is out on January 27th. And yes, please enjoy and
It's set to Netflix. Why at 9:30? It's really early.